All right, so we are here again today, and we are going to do the second in our series. We did our budgeting video. If you guys missed that, there's a link to it below. And we are here with Julie Ann Miller, an AFC certified financial coach. And we have going to talk about credit today with Julie Ann. Welcome.
Thank you, Judy. We wanted to touch back around to credit. Credit is something that many people think of in terms of their credit cards and any debt that they may have. But credit itself is really so much more than that. And that's what we wanted to talk about today. We want to talk about what credit is, what makes up your credit score, and why that's important, and just a few things on how to manage your credit and your credit cards briefly, so that way you can maintain a positive credit.
Right, because it's so much more important than just borrowing money. I mean, there's other things that depend on it. I know people like Dave Ramsey teach that credit is the horrible thing and things like that. And when I met Ron 10 years ago, he didn't even have a credit score. So that's, but it is something that's important that everybody needs to maintain, and it affects other things.
Be managed well if people know the right steps to take to be able to do that. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
All right, well, let's get started.
So credit itself, the definition of credit, is when you obtain goods or services without paying at the time of service. And the history of that, the history of your payments, the history of your credit and credit cards and debt, that's kind of all in one umbrella for what we're talking about today. The history of that is what makes up your credit score. So we're going to talk about that. Credit is used to obtain loans. Credit is used to help set interest rates on any debt that you might have, whether it's credit cards or loans. It shows a responsibility of money management, how well you're managing your money. And it can even affect things such as your insurance rates or your rental costs, depending on who's looking at that credit score.
It goes
determining whether or not you're a good person in terms of your payment history.
It can even go into when you're getting an apartment and you need to have your utilities turned on. They look at your credit, and if you don't have good credit, they make you, put a deposit down. And a lot of people that are already struggling, getting utilities turned on, making a deposit is a hard thing to do too.
Yes, it is. And they're trying to protect themselves also. And so that's the only way that they can take a look at that and know, what your history is.
Right.
So the credit score is actually a number that represents how responsible you are with using your credit. And there's a few things that make up that score. It's based on your payment history, your amount of debt owed, the length of credit history, your credit mix, and any new credit. And the largest of those being your payment history. So are you paying your bills on time? And are you paying at least the minimum on those debts that are owed? Usually when you have a debt such as a loan or a credit card, there is a minimum you must pay each month. Are you paying that on time? And are you paying at least what the minimum is? Mm-hmm. So there's a couple different things, those items that make up your credit score. The amount of debt, it looks at the total amount you could owe. For example, on a credit card, maybe you have a limit of $5,000. If you are using most of that, they look at the fact that you have a lot of debt that you owe. So that score is going to get lowered because you owe more debt.
Yeah, that's actually, a lot of times it's referred to as your credit utilization, is how they'll phrase it on your credit reports and the scores correct. And stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. They also look at the length of your credit history. For someone like Ron, who may have not had any credit, You know, they look at that and look at that as almost a negative thing. So
Right.
that lowers his score.
Right.
They like to see at least a little bit of credit because it shows that you're able to manage that money
Right.
in a positive way. They also look at the credit mix. In other words, the types of credit you have. Do you have a mortgage? Do you have rental payments? Do you have loans? Do you have credit cards? So when you look at those, they see the long-term things like mortgages and loans show that you have a long-term commitment to paying positively or not, depending on your situation. And if you have a lot of retail store credit cards, they they look at that and think, oh, well, she's a shopper.
Well, you're looking at the two different types too. You're looking at secured credit and unsecured credit. And a lot of times it may be a little easier to get something that's secured because they can come and take it back if you default on your loan. So
yes, so they're protecting themselves. Absolutely. Yeah. So they look at that credit mix. And then the last one is just a small percentage, and that's if you have new credit. Are you getting a lot of new credit cards? And what might be the reason why you're getting a lot of new credit cards? So that's a concern for them as well. So one of the ways we like to remind you that you can check on that is you can go to annualcreditreport.com to go to the 3 reporting agencies and
Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian.
Yes, and you can look up those the history of your credit. You can check for errors, and you can request a separate credit score, and that will give you a good idea of what other people are looking at if they need to for things such as loans and your mortgages and things like that.
On the excuse me, the free credit reports, I don't believe they give you the credit score for free. They will give you your credit report, but they do not give you your score for free.
Correct. That is something that you have to pay for. Now, sometimes you can get a similar free score from someplace like Credit Karma. It's just an estimate. It's not an actual, but it can still give you kind of an estimate or a guide for where you stand.
Just to touch on that a bit, there's different types of credit score. There's FICO score, there's Vantage scores, and you never honestly know when you're applying for a credit, what score they are actually using, because if you're going into Credit Karma and you say, wow, I have an 800 score, and then you go and they pull it from a different area, you could have a 700. I've seen people say they've had a difference in those estimate credit scores of about 100 points. So you really need to.
Yep, you do need to be careful and what you're looking at, and also who's looking at your score.
Right.
And where they might be pulling.
Right.
Yes. One thing we do want to note on the annualcreditreport.com is right now they are offering a free check, a weekly check on your credit. So that is something that you could take a look at now.
And I will put the links for those below so you can check those out.
Great. The next thing I want to talk about is managing your credit. So you have your credit and you have your credit score. So some ways that you can manage your credit is by paying your bills on time, paying any minimums due, and whenever it's possible, and we recommend as possible as all the time, by paying off your balance due. The more frequently you're able to pay off the balance due each month, the stronger your credit payment history is, because you don't want to lose sight of how often you need to pay. You don't want to lose sight of how big your balance is. Sometimes that balance starts rolling over and it gets bigger and bigger, and that's what they call a snowball. That
in the wrong direction.
Yeah, in the wrong direction, exactly. And that's a whole nother module we could go on, but today. So you can use those couple tips to help you manage your credit. Something as simple as keeping a record of what's due. helps you with knowing when your bills are due, when your income comes in, and when you need to pay it. Spending less than you make, being careful about how much you might need to be able to afford a mortgage or a rent, how much you're putting on your credit cards, and making sure that you can pay it when the bill comes due. You also want to keep track and monitor your accounts and your credit, watch for errors. Errors do happen, so you want to keep an eye out for those and make sure that they get corrected. And something also is you just want to try whenever possible to keep your debt at zero, or very low and very manageable. So by doing those steps, you can really keep an eye on and keep managing your credit in a positive way.
Right.
Finally, I want to just talk to you a little bit about how you might know when you're in trouble and when you might need help. Okay. If your interest rates for your credit or your loans starts to jump really high, that's an indication that they see that your payment history has not been positive. So they start raising those rates. They want to make sure that they're being covered in case of something happens. So if your interest rates start going up to 12, 15, 18%, or even higher,
29.9.
you want to start, something that's out of the ordinary, if it starts getting out of hand.
Is that the highest they can do on anything, or are there other ones? I mean, I knew it was a law. I thought it was a law that was 29.9 was the highest it could go, but I've seen,
and usually when they get that high, I see that people are then really struggling to meet those minimum payments.
Because your minimum payments is barely covering your interest on it. You're paying a couple dollars, and it's just, again, the snowball effect. You're paying more, and it's just...
Yeah, and then it gets hard to catch up. It really gets hard to catch up. Another one, and that actually leads to the next one. When it gets to that point, then you have trouble paying the minimum due. So when you get to a point where you're having trouble paying the minimum due, then you're starting to have some real financial issues that might need to be, addressed. You're probably starting to feel embarrassed. You feel unorganized. You might be feeling angry, with yourself that you got to this point. So it's important that you really start to sit down and think about, okay, what do I need to do to get this back on track? You might also start to see that balance, as we talked about, starts rolling over month to month, and you just can't seem to chip away at it. You start feeling like your spending is out of control, and it might be spending that's already passed. Maybe you had some things that came up, or you just felt like you were in a good place and you really went wild.
Even right now, people are just trying to get by. So it's, a struggle to get by, or they have a medical issue that comes up and they don't realize it, or they can't work for a couple of weeks or something like that. And it's real easy to get out of control really quick.
Yeah, and people, sometimes when that happens, they get nervous and anxious, so they don't know what they should pay first.
Right.
And sometimes they pay the wrong things first, something that will upset the apple cart, and then next thing you know, they couldn't pay a utility or couldn't pay their rent. And so that spending gets out of control in an unorganized way, a little bit different. So that's when you really might need some, additional financial help. So that's when you can reach out to somebody and say, okay, help me figure out what I need to do and how I need to do it.
Right.
Yeah. So it's important that you understand, we just gave you some basic concepts today about credit and credit history. There's certainly a lot more that can be covered. And, there's different things out on the web and through some coaching resources that you can learn more about it if you want to educate yourself, or if you need to reach out to someone. I do recommend that you at least get one of your annual credit reports each year. You have 3 of them. You can rotate them. You can get one a year. You can do all 3 if you want. It really depends on what you want to take a look at. But that
and sometimes there's something on one that there's not on the other. That's why it's important to grab all 3 credit reports.
Yes, they do report different things.
I mean, you could have a name similar to somebody else and something from theirs is showing up on one of your credit reports. So,
yeah, and you could see things, maybe you paid a bill and the agency didn't report it yet, so that might be an error that you might find or something that you might want to keep an eye out for. You want to make sure if you're paying something like a mortgage or something regular like a loan, that all of those payments are being posted, that any payments you've made, they're posting them on that, to show your positive history. So those are the kinds of things that you want to take a look at. So we just encourage you to keep, making positive choices with your finances. Keep looking at those credit reports so you know what you have and where you're going with it, and just keep working towards doing positive things.
All right, so there you have it. We have the what your credit score is and what affects it, and how to manage it. And again, if you get in real trouble, reach out to somebody. You've got financial coaches. Julie is a great financial coach and AFC certified, so she can definitely help you with those credit issues. Her links are below in the descriptions. And we also have in the description the link for the annual credit report. Go in and check those out, and stay on top of things, stay on top of your credit. It's the best thing you can do is just keep plugging away at it, and things do get better if you pay attention to them. So like always, don't forget to like this video, share it. Maybe you don't need it, somebody else might. All right, I'd like to thank Julianne for being here with us again today. And I think we have a good series coming up in the next one too.
All right, thanks, Judy.
All right, have a great day, everyone, and we will talk to you soon.
Yep, take care.
Bye.